Good day, everybody. Welcome back into Mining Stock Daily. We have a corporate introduction featuring a new company and their CEO. Happy to welcome in David Gower, CEO of Emerita Resources. Emerita does trade on the TSX Venture with the symbol EMO and on the OTC with EMOTF. We have had a couple of passive conversations with prior guests regarding Emerita, but happy to finally welcome in David to get this introduction, really a corporate update straight from management themselves. So, David, welcome into Mining Stock Daily.
Oh, thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on because this has been an interesting story all around. Not only has in the last few months, when a lot of the juniors have really just been having a heck of a time finding a bid, Emerita has been really an outperformer. Was about a year ago trading, I don't know, what is it, around 20 cents, and is now currently trading at $1.71 Canadian. It was above $2 not too long ago. So this is really interesting, but we really got to open the book here, David, and if we can get a kind of the history of Emerita and this exploration and land package you have in Spain, that can help lay the groundwork as we move forward in our conversation.
Okay, well, I'm happy to provide that. So the projects are located in what's known as the Iberian Pyrite Belt in the south of Spain, and it actually extends into southern Portugal as well. They're volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits, which I'm very familiar with. My background, I was 20 years with Noranda and Falconbridge, and finally I was the global exploration manager for Falconbridge when Xstrata took over, and these types of deposit were our bread and butter. So in Canada, deposits such as Kidd Creek, Brunswick Mining, Matagami Camp, all of these deposits are of this type. The Iberian Pyrite Belt is one of the most productive belts in the world for this type of deposit. So it's actually produced off and on since the Romans, but really it continues to be one of the premier belts for this type of polymetallic deposit. And right now, is probably one of the best times from a business and jurisdictional point of view to be actually active in this region. About 3 months ago, the government of the region declared that underground mining coming out of COVID was going to be given preferred status as an economic activity for post-COVID rebuilding of the economy. And about a week after that announcement, so it's not coincidental, the European Union announced a 3.2 billion euro fund. And this is a relatively small area, just 2 small provinces, to support mining and metallurgical projects, and declared it strategically important to the European Union as a supplier of strategic metals. So it's at a time when in fact, the business that we're in is actually being really well supported by government at all levels. Geologically, it's been designated because obviously it has that kind of potential. We have lots of good company here. Trafigura has an operation close to us. Probably the most important operation in the region is owned by Lundin, which is just across the border in Portugal. First Quantum has an operation where they've just announced a 500 million euro expansion, and Rio Tinto has a copper smelter, Glencore has a zinc smelter in Spain. So it's a very good jurisdiction to work in, and it's a very good time in terms of the permitting and business environment to be active here.
Can you open up a conversation here regarding the Spanish government's move towards kind of making underground mining? I don't think preferred treatment is the appropriate definition, but it's important work for the company from COVID. Why was COVID the catalyst for underground mining to get notoriety here from the government?
I think in part through this period, as in many other places, the European Union found it was struggling because of the supply chain issues related to COVID, to source strategic metals, and they've got a very aggressive objectives and commitments related to transitioning their economy to the green economy. And basically their conclusion is they need to have more domestic production, domestic in the European sense, in order to really accomplish that. And so I believe it basically comes from that whole COVID is the complicating factor on top of their whole move to greening their economy.
Okay. And because of this positioning for underground mining, does that pose challenges for exploration? Like, are you beholden to finding higher grade at greater depths? Because if it were cheaper to mine an open pit, it doesn't sound like that would be appropriate or given.
Yeah, it doesn't preclude an open pit mine in any way. However, these deposits, even though many of them have been open pitted historically, are actually the geometries of them are actually better for underground mining and ramp access. They're at surface, the ones that we're working on. However, because of the orientation and the shape of them, you end up with very high strip ratios, and it's actually a better business to take a higher cut off and go underground. You end up producing essentially the same amount of metal from less tons, lower capital because you could use smaller mills, and it also has the attraction of being able to put tailings back underground as backfill, as opposed to having to deal with it on surface like you would with an open pit.
Okay. It's sticking with the properties in southern Spain. I was wondering if you can kind of walk us through these properties and give us some background. I know there's Asnalcollar and then La Infanta, and I believe there's a third one in there as well, Romanera. Can you kind of walk us through where these things stand and what type of historical work has been done on these properties?
Okay, so the first one I'll talk about is the project where we're drilling right now. It's called Iberia Belt West. It's very close to the Portugal border. This deposit or this project was awarded to us after a disputed public tender that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Spain. But we have it now 100%. There are 3 deposits on this project. So Infanta is the one we're drilling. It's very high grade at surface. It was actually drilled by Phelps Dodge in the 1980s, but they had a very tiny land position at that time and couldn't drill it out. They were surrounded by Rio Tinto. And then Romanera there's 3 deposits, as I mentioned. So Romanera is the second deposit and the larger one, which was drilled by Rio Tinto around that time as also. And then there's a deposit in between the two. So the project itself is about 12 kilometers long, and it's about 8 to 9 kilometers between Infanta and Romanera. So these deposits would all feed a central mill, essentially. And we've just started the drilling, and really the turning point for the company, you mentioned what happened with the stock, was when the Supreme Court awarded the bid to us, because it's a valuable asset. So we essentially had a major step up in the value of the company over that. Now that we've just started the drilling in the last 10 days or so, I think we've released assays for the first 3 drill holes on Infanta. We have 2 drills operating and very high grades. The last hole I think that we put out had about 3.8% copper and 30% zinc, as an example, with about 230 grams per ton silver. It's very good grade ore, very valuable and very close to surface. That hole was only down 60 meters. Our objective with that drill program will be to extend the deposit for about 1,200 meters along strike, which we think is doable based on geophysics and mapping, and down to a depth of about 300 to 400 meters at least. Whereas Phelps Dodge only drilled to about 110 meters because dipped off the property at that point.
Mm.
The other deposit, Romanera, is much larger. It already has a 34 million ton resource, of which we're focused on kind of 11 to 12 million tons of high grade. But again, it's also wide open. It's drilled to about 350 meters depth already. It's still 20 meters thick at that depth. And the last round of drilling was done by Rio Tinto. And interesting thing with Rio Tinto, that at that time they owned the Neves-Corvo mine. And their focus there was copper and tin. And they were sending 5% zinc basically to the tailings. They didn't even put a zinc circuit in. They just were not in the zinc business. Romanera is a zinc, lead, silver deposit with a pretty good gold credit, but very little copper. And so for that reason, it just didn't meet their strategy at the time. And of course, Neves-Corvo is one of the best deposits anywhere historically. So it had a high bar to get over anyway, to get interest in investment at that time. So, but for us, we've got a project now. We have about 50 historical drill holes by Phelps Dodge into Infanta, and about the same in Romanera by Rio Tinto. So it's a very low level of geological risk because we're essentially drilling off a known deposit that already has tonnage that you could take to feasibility. And really, it's just a matter of expanding it and doing the work now. So this project can easily get to, possibly 20 to 30 million tons between those three deposits. And that's why we still have, a lot of value to add just on this property alone.
What's the historical drilling done at those properties by Phelps Dodge and Rio Tinto? Do you need to return to those drill holes and twin them for confirmation because of their historical nature?
Yes, we have to do at least a portion of them for 43-101 purposes, because there's no core remaining. We need to build our own models, in a proper 3D models. We also need material for metallurgy. So, our intention will be to take it through to feasibility and pre-feasibility. And for that, we need samples. So the process that we're following is we're starting in the middle of these things and basically stepping out. We hope to not do more than about 20% of the historical holes as part of the redrilling, but when we do the QA/QC and the comparison with the historical data, we'll be able to determine for sure that statistically the data sets are close enough. And I would expect they will be, because Rio Tinto and Phelps Dodge are obviously, major companies that were quite capable of doing good assay and proper sampling. But that's basically required for us to have confidence in that part of the resource and to do the metallurgy.
Can you describe permitting process? So you have full permits for exploration on all these properties, I'm assuming. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But what is the kind of, working with the federales in Spain like when getting permits for this mineral exploration?
They have a very well-defined process. I would say it's probably there is a fair amount of bureaucracy with it, but it's well-defined. And as long as you follow the guidelines and don't take shortcuts, really, it's not that different than parts of Canada, I would say, or even more favorable parts of the U.S. Certainly, Trafigura at Aguas Tenidas has permitted a mine in the last number of years. The new operation that they just announced by First Quantum near Seville, where they're doing the 500 million euros, it was permitted on a reasonably good timeline, I would say. I mean, none of these things will be done in a in a week in terms of greenfields projects, but it is an area with a long history of mining, with a lot of past and current producers in the area. So the communities are generally on board, and you just have to make sure that you do things to, proper modern standards, and it will be fine. The Asno-Coir project, which you mentioned, will be a bit different in that it's a public tender and it's still in court, but we expect we will win that probably between now and the end of the year. It's in the very final stages of that lawsuit, and we've won every round of it so far. But that public tender was actually put out by both levels of government, federal and regional, for the purpose of putting it back into production, because it was a past producer that had an accident in 1997, which shut it down. So the community lobbied to have that put up for public tender for the jobs. All levels of government and all parties unanimously agreed to it. So, and when we did the tender, we essentially developed a full new redevelopment plan as part of that tender. We spent about $1 million. So that one will permit very quickly because it's already permitted in principle to go into production. What you will be permitting there is the details of your mill and tailings management and your water management, and obviously your social responsibility issues and community involvement and all those things. But the actual concept that it's going to be a mine has already been approved.
Can you take us way back and talk about how Emerita became what it is today? How was it formed? Who formed it, and how did it kind of come to have these land positions in Spain?
We started around 2013. I was involved with Noranda. We looked at Neves Corvo in Portugal a couple of times as a potential acquisition. So I was involved with the due diligence teams on that for them. And then with Falconbridge, after Noranda and Falconbridge merged, there was actually a nickel producer in Spain, very close to here, called Agua Blanca, that we looked at as a potential acquisition. So I was well familiar with the geology of the region, and always really attracted to the potential here, because it went through years of what I would say neglect from the industry, related in part to the general European Union focus on other things, if you will, than mining, which is part of the reason why I think it's a very good time to be there now that the pendulum has swung back. But we started as a small early stage gold explorer, and when these tenders came up for these very valuable base metal projects, that really fits my background and my understanding. And really, at that time, there wasn't a lot of competition for them, because we were just in one of those markets where nobody really cared. The majors were focused on their balance sheets. It was kind of a down part of the market, and it just presented the opportunity. Little did we know that it would involve such a lengthy process of disputes, but that also in itself says something about the value of these things. People, large companies were willing to fight over them. So
you mentioned competition. This was actually something I wanted to get your thoughts on, especially when it comes to VMS projects such as you're seeing in Spain. We're seeing massive projects in Eastern Europe. We're seeing massive VMS projects up in Scandinavia. It seems like there is quite the support, not only from sovereign nations, but from the EU in general, for these types of projects, because of the resource applications for a new energy infrastructure or electric vehicles or whatever, that end case may be. But does that provide more competition for Emerita and other junior companies such as yourself for capital? Do you feel that way, or is it kind of just a one-off, just each is on their own base case?
I think the supply of these metals relative to the demand is going to make good projects financeable. And certainly we're seeing that right now, that there are funds available for these types of projects. Something like an Asno-Coir or even an Iberia Belt West, to be honest, if we're successful and take that through to feasibility and grow it the way we think we will, it certainly will be financed. Asno-Coir is a bit different in that it's got several deposits on it already, drilled as a reserve because it was in production. So the Los Frailes mine, which was in production in the 90s, it was a 73 million ton open pit, of which there's about 28 million tons of high grade. But it's wide open. It's 45 meters thick at the deepest hole because it was only drilled to 300 meters below the pit. There's another open pit on that property, the original Asno-Coir mine from the 60s, and maybe even post Second World War probably. There's 90 million tons. It's more of a copper silver rich system, of which probably half of that would be accessible from underground. And then there's at least two other deposits that probably add up to at least another 10 to 20 million tons. What that says to me, that property will be material to every major player in this sector. And Amarita, it's very unlikely we'll get to build that one, to be honest. It will be up to our shareholders to speak, but we will take it through to some stage of permitting, I would think. But we will have a resource there that's going to be not unlike what Arizona Mining had in the US, with kind of a 50-year mine life type of potential that will be attractive to the majors that really look to those kind of assets because they're very rare.
Can you tell me about your share structure and who are your major shareholders?
Yeah, right now we have about 177 million shares basic. There's we have about 27 million in the bank, Canadian that is. There's 37 million warrants outstanding, all of which are in the money. So they represent probably another, and they're being exercised actually at a nice manageable rate, such that our burn is actually being offset by our warrant exercise at this point. So we're not actually chewing through our treasury at all. So fully diluted, we're around 230 million shares. With Iberia Belt West, our target is to try to get our market cap really close to $1 billion over the next year or so, in terms of, we complete the drilling of the deposits and the expansion on that property, and get initial PEA type economic analysis done. Asno-Coir on its own, if and when that's resolved, and we expect it will be this year, that is a sea change in the company. It's just a different scale of project, because it's already been drilled off as a mine, and the permitting situation there is very unusual. So we would see that as a huge catalyst for a re-rate for the company.
You talk about $1 billion market cap. You're currently sitting about just north of 250 mil. So you're talking a 4x jump in the goal for your market cap. Where you're at now, given the current valuation of the company, do you feel like you are appropriately valued?
I don't think I'll ever be satisfied, to be honest. There's some, I would say, some value, but very little built in for the potential at Asno-Coir. And that lawsuit is just entering the final stage. It's really going into the sentencing stage now. And Spain is very different than Canada and the US. What counsel is telling us, and including unrelated counsel, that at this stage, conviction is at 99.9%, 99.9%. Like they just don't go to this stage of the trial unless it's essentially over. The reason that's important in Spain, and there's a lot of precedence for this with public tenders, if there's the commission of a crime in awarding a public tender, that bid must be disqualified. And we're the only other qualified bidder in this public tender. And the lawsuit in this case, it is a criminal case. It's to do with corruption. And there are 16 people charged, between the 2 from the other company and the rest are government people. Only one of those people actually has to be convicted, and this is over, and the government can move ahead and award the contract. So it's been 6 years to get to this stage, but we've been through every appeal. We've had 5 judges in the superior courts unanimously support the case, and it's essentially over. So that's kind of where we are. We're very close in the next few months to hopefully achieving or acquiring that fantastic asset.
So until that news finally hits the tape and you are announced that, I assume lots more drilling results to share with the market through the next few months.
That's right. And we're well financed. The drilling that we're doing right now for the 3 deposits, we'll probably do for quite a bit less than $10 million. The initial program that we've laid out at Infanta is only around $1 million, but we expect to expand the program. So I'd say it's $2 million. So we're in very good shape to take that project ahead aggressively, and we're already capitalized to start a program at Asmalcoir.
Keep us posted. You feel free to drop me a note and come on the show and give us updates. When material news does hit. But in the meantime, Dave, it's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you so much for this kind of introduction for the listeners of Amarita Resources.
Well, great. Thank you very much. And I appreciate your interest. Take care.
That's Amarita Resources and a corporate introduction. Again, they trade on the TSX Venture with the symbol EMO. That's it for today, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with a news briefing. Be well. The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak to a licensed financial representative before making any investment decision.